Ethan Caldwell thought he was the king of the world. He had the seven-figure architecture firm, the trophy home in the hills, and the young, beautiful mistress waiting in a downtown hotel. He thought his wife, Julianne, was just the quiet woman who folded his laundry and nursed his son. He was wrong. Dead wrong. When Ethan returned home at 6 a.m., hungover and smelling of another woman, his key didn't fit the lock. The door opened, but it wasn't his wife standing there. It was a stranger. And in that split second, Ethan realized his life wasn't just ruined, it had been erased. This is the story of how one night of pleasure cost a man his entire existence. The morning sun over the Seattle skyline was usually Ethan's favorite sight. It reminded him of everything he had built, the steel, the glass, the money. But today, the light just pierced his retinas, exacerbating the pounding headache that throbbed behind his eyes. He checked his Rolex, 6:15 a.m. Perfect. He had timed it exactly. He would tell Julianne his flight from Chicago had landed early. He'd shower, wash the scent of Sienna's expensive vanilla perfume off his skin, and be holding his 4-month-old son, Noah, by the time Julianne came down for coffee. It was the same routine he'd pulled 3 times this month. He pulled his black Mercedes G-Wagon into the driveway of 4200 Crestview Lane. He frowned. The driveway was empty. Julianne's white Range Rover was gone. She must have gone for an early run with the stroller, he told himself, though a prickle of unease ran down his spine. Julianne rarely ran this early, not with Noah's sleep regression. Ethan walked up the stone path, fumbling for his keys. He jammed the brass key into the custom mahogany door. It stopped halfway. He pushed harder. It wouldn't turn. "Damn it," he muttered, twisting it violently. "Come on." He stepped back, checking the house number. 4200. This was his house. He had designed the entryway himself. He tried the key again, jiggling it with frustration. Suddenly, the deadbolt clicked, but not because of his key. It clicked from the inside. The door swung open. Ethan prepared his smile. "Honey, I lost my—" The words died in his throat. Standing in the doorway was not Julianne. It wasn't even the nanny. It was a man. A heavy-set man in his 50s, wearing a Metallica t-shirt and holding a mug of coffee that Ethan recognized as his mug. The two men stared at each other. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. "Can I help you, pal?" the man asked, his voice gravelly. Ethan blinked, the alcohol in his system making the world tilt. Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" The man took a sip of coffee. "Your house?" "Buddy, I think you've got the wrong address. This is 4200 Crestview." Ethan snapped, his architect's arrogance surging back. "I designed this house. I live here. Where is Julianne?" The man leaned against the doorframe, looking bored. "Look, I don't know a Julianne. I bought this place yesterday. Closed at 4 p.m. Keys in hand by 5 o'clock. Now, unless you're the pool guy, you need to get off my property." "Bought it?" Ethan laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "That's impossible. I didn't list it. My name is on the deed. Ethan Caldwell." The man's expression shifted from boredom to annoyance. He turned his head and shouted into the house. "Hey, Linda, bring the paperwork on the counter." A woman appeared a moment later, looking equally confused, handing the man a blue folder. The man flipped it open and shoved a paper toward Ethan's face. "Read it and weep, pal." Ethan grabbed the paper. It was a standard closing disclosure. The address was correct. The sale price was $3.2 million, undervalued. Ethan noted with a detached part of his brain, and the seller's signature. His eyes widened. The seller was listed as the Caldwell Family Trust, and the signature at the bottom, in perfect, looping cursive, was Julianne Marie Caldwell, trustee. "She can't sell this," Ethan whispered, his hands shaking. "She doesn't have the authority. I'm the primary beneficiary." "Take it up with your lawyer," the man said, snatching the paper back. "Now get lost before I call the cops." The door slammed shut in his face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Ethan stood there, staring at the wood grain. the smell of vanilla perfume suddenly making him want to vomit. To understand how Ethan found himself locked out of his own life, one had to look at the previous 24 hours. Ethan hadn't been in Chicago. He had been 20 minutes away at the Four Seasons downtown in the penthouse suite. He had told Julianne he was meeting with the partners of Sterling and Finch for a massive commercial zoning project. "It's a huge opportunity, Jules," he had said, kissing her forehead as she burped Noah on her shoulder. "If I land this, we can finally buy that vacation home in Aspen." Julianne had looked at him with those tired hazel eyes. She looked worn out. The pregnancy had been hard, the birth harder, and Noah was colicky. "Okay, Ethan," she had said softly. "Just come home as soon as you can. I miss you. Noah misses you." "I do it for us, babe." He had lied effortlessly. He had driven straight to the hotel, where Sienna was waiting. Sienna was everything Julianne wasn't right now: vibrant, energetic, and uncomplicated. She was a 24-year-old interior design intern at a rival firm. She looked at Ethan like he was a god. They ordered room service, oysters, Wagyu beef, a $600 bottle of Dom Perignon. "You're so tense," Sienna cooed, massaging his shoulders as he checked his phone. "Is it your wife?" "She's just needy." Ethan sighed, putting his phone face down. He had 3 missed calls from Julianne. He ignored them. "She doesn't understand the pressure I'm under. She thinks money just appears in the bank account." "You work so hard," Sienna whispered. "You deserve this." At 9 p.m. his phone buzzed again. A text from Julianne. "Ethan, please call me. It's urgent. It's about the accounts." Ethan scoffed. "Probably overfished the checking account buying organic diapers again," he muttered. He texted back. "In a crucial meeting. Can't talk. Handle it. Love you." He turned the phone off. That was his fatal mistake. He spent the night drinking champagne and complaining about how Julianne had let herself go and how she didn't appreciate his genius. He felt powerful. He felt like a man who controlled his destiny. He woke up at 5 a.m. with a dry mouth. Sienna was still asleep, her arm draped over the empty side of the bed. He felt a fleeting moment of guilt, but he squashed it down. He left a stack of cash on the nightstand, $500 for a cab and incidentals, and slipped out. He thought he was being slick. He thought he was the player. He didn't realize that while he was playing checkers in a hotel room, Julianne had been playing 4D chess for 6 months. Back on the porch, Ethan pulled out his phone. 8% battery. He dialed Julianne. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." He froze. He dialed again. Same message. He dialed the house landline. "We're sorry, this number has been disconnected." Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced his hangover. He ran to his G-Wagon. He needed to get to the bank. He needed to get to his office. He sped toward the downtown branch of Chase Bank, ignoring speed limits. He burst through the doors at 8:55 a.m. just as they were unlocking them. He pushed past the security guard and marched straight to the desk of the branch manager, Mr. Henderson, a man Ethan had played golf with. "Mr. Henderson!" Ethan shouted. The bank was quiet, a few tellers turning to look at the disheveled man in the wrinkled suit. "Mr. Caldwell?" Henderson looked over his spectacles, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you. I thought you were relocating." "Relocating?" Ethan slammed his hands on the desk. "I just went home, and some Neanderthal is living in my house. He says Julianne sold it. I want to see my accounts. Now." Henderson's face went pale. He typed rapidly on his keyboard. "Mr. Caldwell, please, lower your voice. Come into my office." Once the door was shut, Henderson turned the monitor so Ethan could see it. "Ethan," Henderson said, his voice grave, "the joint savings account, the investment portfolio, the emergency fund, they were all closed out yesterday morning via wire transfer." Ethan stared at the screen. "Balance, $0. Closed out? To where?" "An offshore account in the Caymans. It was fully authorized. Julianne came in with the power of attorney documents you signed in February." Ethan's knees gave out. He collapsed into the guest chair. February. He remembered February. He was busy with the Skyline project. Julianne had come into his home office with a stack of papers. Just standard tax stuff and the trust updates for Noah, she had said. Sign here, here, and here. He hadn't read them. He had been on a call with a contractor. He had just signed. He signed a durable power of attorney, granting her full control over his assets in the event of his incapacity or, absence. But I wasn't absent, Ethan screamed. I was in Chicago. I was on a business trip. Henderson looked uncomfortable. According to the bank's records, Julianne provided a notarized affidavit stating you were unreachable during a financial crisis, activating the clause. We tried to call you yesterday, Ethan, all day. Ethan remembered the phone turned off in the hotel room. The text, in a crucial meeting. Can't talk, handle it. She used my text, Ethan whispered. She used my own lie against me. There's something else, Henderson said, sliding a white envelope across the desk. She left this for you. She said you'd come here first. Ethan's hands shook so badly he tore the envelope trying to open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph was grainy, taken from a distance but clear enough. It was Ethan and Sienna, kissing in the lobby of the Four Seasons 3 months ago. The note was handwritten. Ethan, you always said you wanted a life without burdens. You wanted to be free. Congratulations. I didn't sell the house for the money. I have plenty of my own. You just never asked about my grandfather's inheritance because you were too busy talking about yourself. I sold the house so you wouldn't have a bed to sleep in. Don't look for us. Noah deserves a father who knows that family isn't just a word you use to look good at charity galas. P.S. I canceled your credit cards. I hope Sienna likes Dutch treat. Jules Ethan stared at the paper. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't just left him. She had executed a demolition. He reached for his wallet to check his cards. His Platinum Amex. His Visa Infinite. He ran to the ATM outside the manager's office. He inserted the Amex. Card declined. Please contact issuer. He inserted the debit card. Insufficient funds. He checked his pockets. He had the cash he had taken out for Sienna. He had left $500 on the nightstand. He had exactly $40 and a pack of gum in his pocket. Ethan Caldwell, the man who designed skyscrapers, was standing in a bank lobby, homeless, penniless, and alone. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the realization that Julianne, the quiet, mousy woman he had underestimated for 5 years, was actually a predator, and he had been the prey. Mr. Caldwell, Henderson called out from the doorway. I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to leave. You're causing a disturbance. Ethan walked out into the blinding daylight. He had to find her. He had to fix this. But where do you start looking for a ghost? And then his phone buzzed. 4% battery. It was a text from a number he didn't know. She knew everything, Ethan, but she didn't do this alone. Meet me at the shipyard, warehouse 4, come alone. Ethan stared at the screen. Who was this? An ally? Or another trap? The Seattle shipping yards were a graveyard of rusted metal and screaming seagulls. Ethan parked his G-Wagon behind a stack of shipping containers, the fuel light blinking angrily. He had driven here on fumes and adrenaline. Warehouse 4 was a dilapidated, corrugated steel structure that smelled of dead fish and diesel. Ethan pushed the heavy sliding door open just enough to slip through. Inside, it was shadowy, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light piercing the roof. Hello? He called out, his voice cracking. I'm here. A figure stepped out from behind a wooden crate. Ethan squinted. It wasn't a man in a trench coat. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Sienna. But she didn't look like the Sienna from the penthouse. The glamorous dress was gone, replaced by oversized gray sweatpants and a hoodie. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, leaving her looking young and terrified. She was clutching a cheap burner phone. Sienna? Ethan asked, bewilderment washing over him. You sent the text? What is going on? Stay back, she hissed, holding up a hand. Don't come closer, Ethan. They might be watching. Who? Ethan stepped forward anyway, his anger flaring. Did you help her? Did you help Julianne steal my money? You idiot. Sienna spat, tears welling in her eyes. You think this is about a jealous wife? You think the universe revolves around your ego? Julianne didn't just leave you. She saved herself from the blast radius. Ethan stopped. What are you talking about? Sienna took a shaky breath. I wasn't just an intern, Ethan. I was hired. I was paid $20,000 up front, with another $30,000 promised upon successful dissolution of the marriage. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Paid? By who? Does the name Marcus Thorne ring a bell? The name hit Ethan like a sledgehammer. Marcus Thorne was his biggest rival, the head of Thorne and Associates. The man Ethan had beaten for the Skyline project. Thorne sent you? Ethan whispered. He wanted to ruin your reputation, Sienna explained rapidly. The plan was simple. Seduce you, get evidence of you neglecting your work and your family, and then leak it to the board of partners at your firm. Thorne wanted to show you we're unstable, a liability. He wanted to force a vote of no confidence so he could buy your firm out for pennies on the dollar. Ethan leaned against a rusted pillar. He felt sick. So, you were playing me the whole time? At first, Sienna admitted, looking down, but then Julianne found out. How? Because she's smarter than you. She's smarter than all of us. 2 weeks ago, she approached me. Ethan's jaw dropped. She met you? She was waiting in my car in the parking garage. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just showed me a dossier. She had photos of me meeting with Thorne. She had recordings. She told me I had 2 choices. I could continue with Thorne's plan and she would ruin me, expose me as a corporate spy, send the evidence to the police, ruin my career before it started. Or what? Or I could tell her everything. When Thorne was planning to strike, what evidence he had fabricated. Fabricated? Ethan asked sharply. Thorne wasn't just going to use the affair, Ethan. He planted financial irregularities in your projects. Embezzlement. Bribes to city officials. He used your login credentials, which I got from your phone while you were sleeping last month, to verify the transfers. Ethan's mind raced back to the bank. The power of attorney. So Julianne knew, Ethan realized aloud. She knew I was being framed for embezzlement. She knew you were going down, Sienna said. She asked me when the story was going to break. I told her Thorne was leaking the fraud evidence to the SEC and your partners this morning at 9 a.m. Ethan checked his watch. It was 10:15 a.m. Oh my God, Ethan breathed. She didn't steal your money to be mean, Ethan, Sienna said, her voice trembling. She liquidated everything yesterday because if she hadn't, the SEC would have frozen your assets today. Thorne is framing you for stealing $5 million from the Skyline project. If the money was still in your accounts, the feds would have seized it as proceeds of crime. Ethan stared at the dusty floor. Julianne hadn't just robbed him. She had raided the treasury before the enemy army could sack the castle. She took the money so the government couldn't get it. Where is she? Ethan demanded, stepping towards Sienna. If she has the money, she has the evidence to clear me. She's gone, Sienna said, backing away. She gave me this phone and told me to warn you. She said, tell Ethan that for 5 years he treated me like furniture. He didn't think I listened when he talked about business. He didn't think I read the contracts he left on the table. He forgot that before I was a mother, I was a forensic accountant. Ethan felt a phantom pain in his chest. He had forgotten. When they met, Julianne was an auditor for a Big 4 firm. He had made her quit when his career took off, insisting he needed a supportive wife at home. He had turned a shark into a goldfish and then forgot she had teeth. She said one last thing, Sienna whispered. She said, tell him the only way to prove his innocence is in the one place he never looked. What does that mean? Ethan shouted. What place? I don't know. That's all she said. Sienna turned and ran toward the back exit of the warehouse. Sienna, wait! Ethan lunged, but she was fast. She slipped through a gap in the metal sheeting. By the time Ethan got outside, he heard a car engine revving and tires screeching away. He was alone again. But now he knew the stakes. He wasn't just broke. He was a wanted man. His phone buzzed. 2% battery. A news alert from the Seattle Times. Breaking. Caldwell Architecture raided by FBI CEO Ethan Caldwell sought for questioning in $5 million fraud scheme. Ethan dropped the phone. It cracked on the concrete. He couldn't go to the police. They would arrest him on sight. He couldn't hire a lawyer. He had no money. The one place I never looked, he muttered to himself. Where? Where did he never look? He looked at his phone. He looked at the mirror. He looked at home. Not the master bedroom. Not his office. The nursery. He never went into the nursery. He always said, "That's your domain, Jules." He hadn't stepped foot in that room in 3 months, claiming the smell of baby powder gave him allergies. He had to get back to the house that now belonged to a stranger. Getting back to Crestview Lane was a nightmare. Ethan had to abandon the G-Wagon a mile away when he saw a police cruiser idling near the entrance of his neighborhood. They were waiting for him. He pulled his suit jacket over his head, ditching the tie, and rubbed dirt on his face to mask his features. He looked like a vagrant, a stark contrast to the man who drove this street yesterday. He moved through the wooded area behind the properties, jumping fences, tearing his expensive Italian trousers on briar patches. He finally reached the backyard of 4200 Crestview. The new owner, the Metallica fan, was in the backyard grilling burgers. The smell of charcoal wafted through the air, making Ethan's empty stomach cramp violently. The man was laughing, talking to the woman, Linda. "Great deal, I'm telling you," the man was saying. "The lady just wanted out. Said the house had bad energy. I say for $3 million, I can handle some bad juju." Ethan crouched behind a rhododendron bush. He needed to get inside. Specifically, he needed to get to the second floor, to the room with the blue pastel walls. He waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun began to dip. Finally, the couple went inside. Ethan saw the lights flicker on in the kitchen, then the living room. He saw his chance. The trellis. Ethan had designed the trellis on the east wing of the house to support wisteria vines. He knew exactly how much weight the cedar beams could hold. He hoped 20 pounds of depression weight gain hadn't compromised the structural integrity. He crept to the side of the house. He grabbed the wood and pulled himself up. His muscles screamed. He hadn't been to the gym in months, too busy with dinners. He scraped his knuckles, bleeding onto the white siding. Just like a thief, he thought bitterly, breaking into my own life. He reached the second-floor window. It was the nursery window. Locked. He pressed his palm against the glass. He looked closely at the latch. It was a simple sash lock. He took off his wedding ring, the gold band he had worn while betraying his wife, and wedged it between the sash and the frame. He twisted. The gold bent, but the latch popped. He slid the window up and tumbled inside. The room was empty. The crib was gone. The changing table was gone. The rocking chair where Julianne had spent countless nights alone was gone. The room was stripped bare, painted a fresh, sterile white by the new owners. The blue pastels were covered. "No," Ethan whispered, crawling across the carpet. "It has to be here. She said it was here." He scanned the room. Nothing. Just 4 walls and a closet. He opened the closet. Empty. He checked the floorboards. Nothing loose. Had Sienna lied? Was this just another game? He sat in the center of the room, head in his hands, ready to surrender. He would just wait here for the police. It was over. As he stared blankly at the wall, his eyes caught something. The air vent. It was located near the baseboard. Standard HVAC return. But Ethan noticed something odd. The screw on the bottom left was vertical. The screw on the bottom right was horizontal. Ethan was obsessive about details. He had fired contractors for not aligning screw heads. When they built this house, he had made sure every screw head was perfectly vertical. He crawled over to the vent. He dug his fingernails under the metal grill and pulled. It came loose easily. The screws were dummy heads glued on. Behind the grill was a dark cavity, and sitting there, wrapped in a plastic freezer bag, was a thick manila envelope and a small, black USB drive. Ethan grabbed them, his heart pounding against his ribs. He opened the envelope. It wasn't money, it was a birth certificate. Noah James Caldwell. But underneath that was another document. A paternity test. Subject, Noah James Caldwell. Alleged father, Ethan Caldwell. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Ethan stopped breathing. He read it again. 0%. Noah wasn't his son. He flipped to the next page. It was a letter from Julianne. Ethan, if you're reading this, you figured out the clue. I'm proud of you. That's the first time you've looked closely at anything in this room. You probably feel betrayed reading that test. You probably think I cheated. I didn't. We did IVF, remember? You were too busy to come to the clinic for the sample deposit that day, so you had your assistant drop it off. You didn't check the labels. You didn't check the paperwork. The clinic made a mistake. A switch. I found out when Noah was born, and his blood type didn't match ours. I tried to tell you. That night in the hospital, I tried. You were on your phone. You said, "Not now, Jules. The market is opening." I realized then that it didn't matter if Noah was yours by blood. You weren't going to be his father anyway. You were just a donor who paid the bills. But Thorne knows. He found out about the clinic error. He was going to use that too, to humiliate you publicly, to say you couldn't even sire your own heir. He was going to leak this along with the fraud charges. The USB drive contains the original audio files I recorded of Thorne threatening me. It proves he orchestrated the fraud. It proves he planted the evidence on your computer. It will clear your name with the FBI. You can take this drive to the police. You can get your life back. You can get your architecture firm back. But you can't have us. I took the money as payment for 5 years of silence, for the emotional labor, and for raising a child you never really looked at. You have a choice, Ethan. Use the drive to save yourself and destroy Thorne. Or come find us and try to be a father to a son who isn't yours. But you can't do both. Because if you expose Thorne, the paternity test becomes public record in the trial. Everyone will know. Your ego won't survive it. Choose. Ethan sat on the floor of the empty nursery, the USB drive cold in his hand. Below him, he heard the heavy thud of boots on the stairs. "Police! Search warrant!" "Is anyone up there?" The blue lights flashed against the white walls. He had seconds to decide. Hide the drive? Destroy it? Or walk out with it held high? Ethan looked at the paternity test. 0.00%. He thought of Noah's laugh. He thought of the way the baby gripped his finger the one time he actually held him for more than a minute. He thought of Julianne, the forensic accountant who had outsmarted a room full of sharks to protect a baby that wasn't even his by blood. The door to the nursery burst open. "Hands in the air! Get on the ground!" Ethan stood up slowly, raising his hands. He held the USB drive tightly in his right fist. "Don't shoot," Ethan said, his voice strangely calm. "I have the evidence. I can explain everything." He had made his choice, but it wasn't the one Julianne expected. The interrogation room at the FBI Seattle field office was a sensory deprivation tank designed to break human will. The walls were lined with acoustic foam that swallowed sound, the air was recycled and stale, and the fluorescent light overhead buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency. Ethan sat handcuffed to a steel table, his expensive suit now stained with drywall dust and dirt from his break-in. Across from him sat Special Agent Miller. She was a woman who looked like she hadn't smiled since the mid-90s. She had been peeling back the layers of Ethan's life for 5 hours, and she wasn't impressed with what she found. Let's review the timeline one more time, Mr. Caldwell, Miller said, her voice monotone. She tapped a stylus against a tablet. You claim you broke into 4200 Crestview, a property you no longer own, because you believed your ex-wife hid exculpatory evidence in an air vent. Evidence that proves Marcus Thorne, a pillar of the Seattle business community, is actually a cyber terrorist and fraudster. I don't claim it, Ethan rasped, his throat parched. He hadn't been given water in hours. The evidence is in that bag, the USB drive. Just plug it in. Miller looked at the plastic evidence bag sitting between them. We have to wait for the cyber forensics team to clear it for malware. Standard protocol. Until then, you're just a guy caught breaking and entering. The door buzzed, and a younger agent slipped in. He whispered something to Miller and slid a laptop onto the table. Miller nodded, her expression shifting from boredom to sharp interest. Looks like the drive is clean, she said, opening the laptop. Let's see what kind of fiction you've cooked up. She inserted the drive. Ethan held his breath. This was it. If Julianne had lied, if the drive was empty or corrupt, he was going to prison for a long time. Miller clicked on a file labeled Thorn_meeting_04.wave. The room filled with the sound of static, followed by the clinking of silverware. Then, a voice, smooth, arrogant, and unmistakable. Caldwell is a dinosaur, Julianne. He thinks architecture is about art. It's about leverage. I need his login for the Sterling server. You get me that, and I guarantee the SEC investigation hits him before he even knows the money is missing. Then, Julianne's voice, shaky, terrified, but clear. And if I don't? If I go to the police? Thorne's laugh was chilling. Then, I release the photos of him and the intern. I ruin his reputation. And then, I make sure the audit trail leads to your personal accounts, not his. You'll be the one in handcuffs, Julianne. Who do you think they'll believe? The billionaire architect or the housewife? Miller stopped the recording. The silence in the room was heavy. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time, the contempt was gone from her eyes. That's Marcus Thorne, she said, more to herself than him. He admitted to the hack. He admitted to the blackmail. There's more, Ethan said, leaning forward as much as the cuffs allowed. Look at the financial logs in the subfolder. It shows the IP addresses. The transfers didn't come from my computer. They came from a remote server Thorne rented in Estonia. Miller clicked through the folders. Her eyebrows shot up. This is thorough. Your wife didn't just record him. She built a forensic case against him. She was an auditor, Ethan whispered. The best I ever knew. I just forgot. Miller paused. Her mouse hovered over a final folder on the drive. It was labeled private_paternity. Ethan's heart stopped. What's this? Miller asked, moving the cursor to open it. Don't, Ethan said, his voice cracking. Miller looked up. Mr. Caldwell, this is an investigation. If there is evidence in there. It's not evidence of fraud, Ethan said, his eyes pleading. It's collateral damage. Julianne put it there for me, to prove a point. It has nothing to do with Thorne or the money. Miller studied his face. She saw the raw panic, the sudden vulnerability in a man who had spent the last 5 hours trying to project strength. She was a federal agent, but she was human. She knew that not every secret was a crime. If I open this, Miller said slowly, it becomes part of the chain of custody. It becomes discoverable by the defense. That means Thorne's lawyers get to see it. It means it could end up in open court. Ethan thought about the letter. 0%. He thought about the media vultures waiting outside. If they found out that Ethan Caldwell, the alpha architect, had been unknowingly raising another man's child due to a clinic error, he would be a laughingstock. His ego would be flayed alive on the front page of the Seattle Times. But then he thought of Noah. He thought of the innocent boy who would be branded a mistake by the world. Delete it, Ethan said firmly. I can't delete evidence, Mr. Caldwell. It's not evidence. Ethan slammed his handcuffed fists on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. It's a family matter, please. If that gets out, it destroys a little boy's life. Thorne is guilty. You have the audio. You have the logs. You don't need that folder." Miller stared at him for a long, agonizing minute. The hum of the laptop fan seemed to fill the room. Finally, she moved her hand. She right-clicked the folder. Delete. "I didn't see anything," Miller said, closing the laptop. "But if you're lying to me, Caldwell, I will personally bury you under the jail." The next 3 months were a blur of flashbulbs and legal motions. The arrest of Marcus Thorne sent shockwaves through the Pacific Northwest. The footage of him being let out of his penthouse in handcuffs was played on a loop on CNN. But Ethan's vindication wasn't the victory lap he had imagined. He was cleared of the fraud charges, yes, but the scandal of his affair with Sienna was public record. Thorne's defense team, desperate to discredit Julianne's recordings, dragged Ethan's personal life into the mud during the pretrial hearings. They painted him as a philandering, negligent husband who drove his wife to desperate measures. They weren't wrong. Ethan sat in the courtroom day after day, listening to lawyers dissect his marriage. He heard details of his own absenteeism he hadn't even realized. He learned he had missed Noah's first doctor's appointment because of a golf meeting. He learned he had forgotten his 5th anniversary because he was at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. He took the stand on the final day. He wore a cheap suit because his assets were still frozen. He looked at the jury, 12 ordinary people who looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Mr. Caldwell," the prosecutor asked, "why didn't you report the blackmail when Ms. Sienna first approached you?" "Because I was arrogant," Ethan said into the microphone, his voice amplified across the silent courtroom. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I was untouchable. I was wrong." It was the first honest thing he had said in public in years. When the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, wire fraud, corporate espionage, extortion, Ethan didn't cheer. He watched Marcus Thorne scream at his lawyers, his face turning a violent shade of purple. Ethan felt nothing, no joy, no triumph, just a hollow exhaustion. Blank. 2 weeks later, Ethan walked back into the offices of Sterling and Finch. The reception was nauseating. The same partners who had voted to oust him, who had called him a criminal in the press, were now lined up with champagne and streamers. "Ethan! My God, it's good to have you back!" shouted Bill Sterling, slapping him on the back. "We knew it was a setup. We never doubted you for a second." Ethan looked at Bill. He remembered the email Bill had sent to the board. "Caldwell is a cancer. Cut him loose before the stock tanks." Sienna had shown him that email. "Thanks, Bill," Ethan said, his smile tight and mechanical. He walked into his office. It was exactly as he had left it. The awards on the shelf. The view of the Space Needle. The leather chair. He sat down. He spun the chair around to look at the city he had helped build. He expected to feel the rush of power return. He expected to feel like the king of Seattle again. Instead, he felt like he was sitting in a mausoleum. His phone rang constantly. New clients. Interviews. Architectural Digest wanted to do a cover story, The Resurrection of Ethan Caldwell. He ignored them all. At 6 p.m., he left the office. He didn't go to a hotel. He drove to 4200 Crestview Lane. His lawyers had managed to unwind the sale of the house. The Metallica fan, a man named Gary, had been refunded his money from the frozen assets of the Thorne estate, a complicated legal maneuver involving the proceeds of the fraud. Gary had been surprisingly gracious, mostly because he made a $50,000 inconvenience fee on top of the refund. Ethan unlocked the door. The house smelled of stale air and cleaning chemicals. He walked through the silent rooms, the living room where he used to ignore Julianne while watching Bloomberg, the kitchen where he complained about the coffee. He walked up the stairs to the nursery. He had hired a painter to cover the white walls back to the original soft blue. He had bought a new crib, a duplicate of the one that was gone. He didn't know why. Maybe he thought if he rebuilt the set, the actors would return. He stood over the empty crib. The silence was absolute. No baby monitor static. No soft breathing. No creak of the rocking chair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the paternity test. He hadn't destroyed the physical copy. He couldn't. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. He traced the numbers with his thumb. Julianne had left him the ultimate out. He could have walked away guilt-free. He could have told himself, "Not my kid, not my problem." It was the logical, rational, architectural move. Cut the dead weight. Redesign the structure. But the biology didn't matter. The blood didn't matter. What mattered was that for 4 months he had held a boy named Noah, and he had failed him. And now he wanted a second chance to fail better. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It wasn't a client. It was the private investigator, a grit-toothed ex-cop named Reynolds, who cost $400 an hour. Ethan answered on the first ring. "Do you have them?" "I think so," Reynolds said, his voice crackling over the line. It wasn't easy. She didn't use credit cards. She rented a place cash in hand. But she slipped up. She registered a library card in her maiden name. "Where?" Ethan demanded, his grip on the phone tightening. "East Coast. Way east. Camden, Maine. Little harbor town. It's quiet. Good place to disappear." Ethan closed his eyes. Maine. As far away from him as she could possibly get without swimming to Europe. "Send me the address," Ethan said. "You want me to verify visual contact first?" Reynolds asked. "That'll cost another day's rate." "No," Ethan said. "I'm done waiting." He hung up. He looked around the nursery one last time. This house was a monument to his ego. It was a museum of his mistakes. He couldn't live here. He walked downstairs, grabbed a notepad from the kitchen counter, and wrote a quick note to Bill Sterling. "Bill, I resign. Effective immediately. I'm taking the sabbatical I should have taken 5 years ago. Don't call me, Ethan." He left the keys on the counter. He didn't pack a bag. He didn't care about the clothes, the watches, or the awards. He walked out to his rental car with nothing but the clothes on his back and the address in his phone. He was driving into the dark, but for the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he was going. Camden, Maine was a universe away from the steel and glass canyons of Seattle. Here, the air didn't smell of exhaust and ambition. It smelled of brine, pine needles, and damp earth. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where the tide mattered more than the stock market. Ethan Caldwell drove his rented Ford sedan down a winding coastal road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt he'd bought at the airport, clothes that felt alien on a body accustomed to Italian silk. He checked the address Reynolds had given him, 14 Lighthouse Road. He found it at the end of a gravel driveway. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't an architectural marvel. It was a small, weathered cottage with peeling yellow paint and a roof that had seen better days. The porch sagged on the left side. To the old Ethan, it would have been a teardown. To the new Ethan, it looked like a sanctuary. He killed the engine. The silence of the woods was heavy, broken only by the distant cry of a seagull. He stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel, his heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had faced federal agents, hostile boards of directors, and a media frenzy, but none of it terrified him as much as walking up this driveway. Then he saw them. Julianne was kneeling in a garden bed near the side of the house, wrestling with a stubborn rosebush. She wore no makeup. Her hair, usually styled in a perfect blowout, was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired, but she also looked real. And sitting on a blanket a few feet away, banging 2 wooden blocks together, was Noah. Ethan stopped at the rusted gate. The hinge squeaked as he pushed it open. Julianne's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. For a second he saw fear, the primal fear of a prey animal spotted by a predator. She stood up quickly, wiping dirt onto her apron, positioning herself between Ethan and the baby. "You found us," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of emotion. "It took a while," Ethan said, stopping 10 feet away. He kept his hands visible, palms open. "You hide well, Jules." "I learned how to hide in plain sight living with you," she retorted, her eyes narrowing. "So, this is it, the shakedown? You brought the lawyers? The police?" "No lawyers," Ethan said softly. "No police, just me." "Then you're here for the money." She crossed her arms. I spent some of it on the house. The rest is in a trust for Noah. You can sue me, Ethan, but I'll fight you. I have enough dirt on you to... I don't want the money, Ethan interrupted. Julianne paused, her brow furrowing. Then why are you here? Revenge? Custody? She let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. You can't get custody, Ethan. You read the file. You know the truth. I read it, Ethan said. He looked past her, at the toddler who had stopped playing, and was staring at him with wide, curious eyes. 0%. That's right, Julianne said, her voice trembling slightly. He's not your son. You have no claim to him. Not biologically, not legally. You're just the man who signed the checks. Ethan took a step closer. I told the FBI to delete the file, Jules. It never came up in the trial. It's gone. Julianne froze. What? Why? Because I didn't want the world to label him a mistake, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. And because when I was sitting in that empty house on Crestview, staring at the walls I designed, I realized something. Biology is just genetics. It's just blueprints. It doesn't build the house. He reached into his back pocket. Julianne flinched, but he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Do you remember this? He asked, unfolding it. It was a drawing, crude, done in crayon, a lopsided house with a red roof, a yellow sun, and 3 stick figures holding hands. I found it in a box you left behind, Ethan said. You drew this 5 years ago. On our honeymoon. We were drinking wine in Tuscany, talking about the future. You said you didn't care if we lived in a palace or a shack, as long as it was us. He looked at the drawing, then at her. I resigned from Sterling & Finch yesterday, Ethan said. Julianne's jaw dropped. You quit? That firm was your god, Ethan. False idol, he corrected. I walked away. I left the awards. I left the keys to the Crestview house on the counter. I have nothing, Jules. No firm, no reputation, no fortune. He knelt down in the grass, ignoring the dampness seeping into his jeans. He was eye level with Noah now. The boy smiled, a gummy, innocent smile that broke Ethan's heart and put it back together in the same second. I'm not here to demand anything, Ethan said, looking up at his wife. I'm here to apply for a job. I know I'm underqualified. I know my references are terrible. But I'm a hard worker. I can fix this porch. I can paint the siding. And I can be a father to a boy who needs one, regardless of whose blood is in his veins. Julianne stared at him. She looked for the lie. She looked for the angle, the manipulation, the ego. But she saw only a man who looked exhausted, broken, and hopeful. You can't just fix this with a speech, Ethan, she whispered, tears finally spilling over. The foundation is cracked. You broke it. I know, Ethan said. I'm an architect, Jules. Fixing cracked foundations is what I do. But I can't do it alone. He waited. The wind rustled the trees. Noah giggled and threw a block at Ethan. Ethan caught it. Julianne took a deep, shuddering breath. She looked at the peeling paint of the cottage, then at the man kneeling in her garden. The roof leaks in the guest room, she said quietly. Ethan smiled. It wasn't his media smile. It was real. I can fix that, he said. And the boiler makes a noise when it rains. I'll take a look at it. And, she hesitated, wiping her eyes. And his sleep schedule is a nightmare. He wakes up at 4 a.m. I'm used to being up at 4 a.m., Ethan said. Usually for work. I think I'd prefer this. She didn't run into his arms. There was no cinematic kiss. She simply stepped back and nodded toward the house. There's a toolbox in the shed, she said. Start with the porch. Ethan stood up. Yes, ma'am. He didn't move in that day. He rented a room above a bakery in town. He came over every morning at 7 a.m. He fixed the porch. He repaired the roof. He learned how to change diapers, how to mash peas, and how to be present. It wasn't easy. There were days of cold silence. There were days of anger. But slowly, brick by brick, Ethan Caldwell built the only structure that would ever truly last: a family. And that is the story of Ethan Caldwell, a man who had to lose his empire to find his soul. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you, losing your job, your house, your status, is actually the best thing, because it strips away the lies and forces you to see what really matters. Ethan learned that being a father isn't about biology/DNA. It's about showing up when it's hard. It's about fixing the porch even when it's raining. If you were in Ethan's shoes and you found out your child wasn't biologically yours after you lost everything, would you have stayed, or would you have walked away to start fresh? It's a tough choice. Let me know your honest answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe so you don't miss our next real-life drama. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.